Alrighty then. More materialism. More materialism for mystics. Oh, so exciting. Okay. It occurred to me that it would be good to talk about what I think materialism and mysticism are, and probably maybe implicitly, if not explicitly, illustrate the relation. Alright, so here's the thing. We have materialism and mysticism. There'll probably be spelling mistakes and typos in these demonstrations. All right. First of all, it's important. Materialism. Materialism. Listen, mystics and skeptics. Materialism is not about substance. Okay, there's an idea of materialism is about substance. It's the idea that all stuff is, stuff out there in the universe is made of substances. Right? There's a lot of famous old errors related to this idea, like the idea of substance implied to ancient thinkers that the soul and the spirit and the mind must be made of a substance that was separate from, say, the substance of the brain. All right. Anyway, my definition of materialism, which is what I'm using in my videos, is not about substance. I don't believe in substance. Substance is the idea that everything's made of some sort of a clay, and then it's atoms that when they combine together act like that and have that texture. No, everything's made of energy. E equals mc squared means everything's made of energy. And matter, mass, substance style, is made of a lot of energy. I think it's pretty clear that what is it decomposed down into is something called energy. So what is materialism? It is a study of facts that matter. Material facts. Material facts. Facts that matter. Facts that matter are those that have consequences. According to criteria. Criteria which define the consequences with respect to a situation or problem. Okay? So it's not the theory that physics that says everything's BBs or everything's some sort of material, atomistic or otherwise. No. It's about facts that matter. And what is a fact? A fact is a perception that didn't just come once. If you see something for an instant, that's not enough. A fact is double-checked, triple-checked, quadruple-checked. The more checked it is, the better of a fact it is. There's a lot of ways to check them. Basically, it's by taking different points of view on an object and also points of view over time. Plus intersubjectivity. Those are the main checks, I think, that you'll find that we do. All right. Now, mysticism. Okay, mysticism's a little bit more difficult. Jeez. Mysticism's a little more difficult to define. It doesn't have as clear a definition. Again, I'm going to give you my definition. Now, the way I take definitions when I'm wanting to work on one that is unclear is I say, well, this is a mystical experience. Maybe I should use a different color. Hey, this was a mystical experience, and this was a mystical experience, and this was a mystical experience, and this was a mystical experience. But this wasn't a mystical experience, and neither was this, and neither was this. And I look for the patterns, and I've drawn this, of course, to show a pattern. And I say, oh, well, I will define mysticism. I'll think of mysticism as this circle. And if I think further and go, oh, look, I had another mystical event here, and another here, and another here, then I might go, oh, mysticism has more of this shape, And then I might say, well, that's kind of irregular, right? So maybe it's, let's just erase the whole thing. Let's say, oh, that's getting a little irregular, kind of kludgy. Let's say I like a simple definition that has to be a circle. And I find, oh, with the new definition, this guy is in there. It's a mystical experience. And I go, you know what? Come to think of it, that was a mystical experience too. But it could also be some other sort of experience. For example, a material experience. Now, the problem with mysticism is it considers itself separate from materialism sometimes. Now, I argue that that's because mystics are taking all of their perceptions, including the little short ones that can't be double-checked, things that might not count as facts, right? Everything. That's great. Do that. But don't reject the material. Those are also those feelings. Seeing something is also a feeling. So you have to listen to those. So don't consider yourself as a distinction dichotomy from materialism. Mysticism's just a bigger circle inside of which is materialism. And I think mystics that realize that are the most promising and positive of mystics. Now, this is the kind of process I would do in any term, but especially a term that needs a stricter definition if we're going to talk about it philosophically. Now, when I look at things mystical, let's say I have this ring. Let's say I thought that my grandmother's ghost inhabited this ring. Would I say the ring is mystical? No, but I'd say that, it's associated with a mystical phenomena. And if I look at it someday, maybe especially when I'm thinking about my grandma, and I go, oh yeah, her ghost is in here, I might feel this feeling. Or when I look out at a huge vista, I tend to have this feeling that, it's not hunger, it's not lust, it's not a million other feelings that I could name that we have all named. It's a spiritual feeling, or it's a mystical feeling. That's what I think mysticism is about. I think that there is a mystical feeling right. I think that there is a mystical feeling, and mystical phenomena are just those, whatever's going on when we have that feeling. Right? We don't know what the feeling means. And I, as a materialist, probably am going to say, you know what, it links to materialism. So take, for example, lust. When you start to experience that feeling, and in puberty, and it's especially intense, I guess, so they say, you can have all kinds of things. You believe it, love at first sight. You believe it's fate. All sorts of even metaphysical truths sort of tend to just flood in, and you're like, well, you're misinterpreting a feeling that's programmed into you through the DNA to make sure you keep reproducing. It doesn't actually mean that the person is the only person for you, and it certainly doesn't mean they're the best for you in some local sense to your happiness. It just means DNA has this program, and overall, with everybody else, we keep producing, and the DNA seems satisfied with that, right? So in other words, I'm just pointing out, you can have a feeling. In ancient times, they might not have figured out that there was this genetic thing, and they really thought, no, it's the gods coming to you and telling you this and that, right? They misinterpreted what the feeling of lust meant, right? What it really was about. It's about ravishing her. Actually, it's about reproduction. Then they could misinterpret that. At least you could imagine that case. We could do this with other feelings, even hunger and stuff. What's it really mean? How do you interpret it when you're a primitive person 150,000 years ago, or say 400,000 years ago? And that's the point we are at with the mystical feeling. We all have it enough to have given it a name and created religions associated and spirituality and all this stuff. And I'm saying all we really know is we have a feeling, a mystical feeling, a kind of it's just like another interesting feeling we know about but haven't talked about as such a lot as a society is the feeling of eureka, the feeling of discovery. It's just like, oh, I got it! And you can have that feeling and be wrong, and it's like, oh no, I didn't get it. But you can have that feeling, it's like, I really did get it, and then you just know it. And then you use it and you work on from that. What's that feeling? That's a feeling. It's not God adding 2 plus 2 for you, probably. It has to do with our evolution and stuff. That doesn't mean that that's all it's about. It doesn't reduce it to only some purposeful function of accidental evolution, because evolution has that purposelessness to it, whereas a feeling of eureka is like, no, I was trying to solve a problem because it led to something else, I had a reason, at the very least curiosity, but probably it's like, no, I'm trying to figure out how to get water from here to there. Oh, I could build a ditch, or whatever it is. It's probably beneficial to our evolution, but it doesn't mean that's all it's about. It also has to do with the fact that, well, we're an animal that has enough spare time to think about moving water from one place to another. We're the only animal that seems to have been able to worry about that. Us and maybe ants and bees or something. So that's what I mean by materialism and mysticism. And so the reason I think they're important together is specifically because I think that there is all of our experiences and a philosophy trying to make some sense, analyze all of our experiences, all of them that we'll have in our mortal life that we've had so far, always somewhat finite, but they seem so innumerable, you could almost consider it infinite, and yet it gets bigger, you have more experiences. All of those together, regardless of if they're hallucinations or anything, all of them, that's mystical. Mystical domain. Right? And the mystical idea defines this out, because it's like, you have experiences that you don't bother to remember. In order to remember them, you have to have some other dopamine release, some other, release of a hormone or peptides to kind of fuse it in. You don't remember every single thing, right? So we're going to say mystical is this feeling, of all the feelings, like hunger or any of them, that might be difficult to figure out, lust, whatever, eureka. The mysticism's the hardest thing. Like, what is it? Eureka, you can understand. You just figured out something, got technology, good for evolution. Hunger, you can understand. Made you go get something to eat instead of be lazy, and you survived, so you could reproduce. Understood. Lust, need to reproduce. Understood. Mysticism, what is that about? Okay, now I have my theory, but that's not what this video is about. But it includes all of the ideas, is what I'm saying. Right? So now, there's a subset in here, 2 subsets I'll talk about. One, I'm going to play a little trick real quick and call this the spiritual feeling. Okay? These are all the things that we experienced while we were having a spiritual feeling. Right? Lots of little things. I guess I think it'd be quicker to do dots. Now, is that the same as the mystical feeling? I don't really know. I know I said earlier that, but usually I consider it the spiritual feeling. And the mystic is the one that properly, the way I like to think of it, includes spiritual feelings in their deliberations about what life means overall. So I don't really talk about mystical feelings. I usually call that a spiritual feeling. And the mystic is the person that's open to that. And I'm saying they shouldn't just be open to that. The mystic should not be in here. Mystic. In there. Limited. No. And then over here is another group called the material. Right? Material events, things that with facts that we've double checked and triple checked that we're confident. If we checked again, it'd be the same. If we told someone else and they checked, it'd be the same. We're confident in that consistency, material consistency, and that they matter in some sense whether they're here or there. Of course, everything matters to a certain degree, but there's a relative gradient that you can establish. So these would basically be physically material. This is where we get the idea of material means substance, physicalness. It really just means, to me, consistency. They're consistent. And then you have things for an individual that would be in this overlap the way I've drawn it. And that's true, and here's where here we hear stories. I mean, over here is a guy, right before he wakes up, has this mystical, spiritual experience, dreaming in a half-dream state about something. He doesn't really consider that material, but it's still important to him, and if he's mystical or spiritual, he'll take it into account. But over here we have, those kind of ghost stories where 2 or 3 people tell them, or I know there was a knife there, the knife definitely fell. There's a material fact involved, right? And so the reason I would do materialism for mystics is because I think a lot of times mystics want to just hang out in here. And that's not good enough, and especially since there's an overlap, the mystic should pay attention to everything. And if the mystic pays attention to the material, we'll finally get some synergy here again, like we used to have in some ancient times. The only really very good thing about ancient times is we did used to have a little synergy between those spheres. Unfortunately, that was accomplished by not making proper distinctions between them and getting confused about spirituality and materiality and what are appropriate reactions to certain material and spiritual conditions. So we had to go through this long thing of ignoring the spiritual, even while it still dominates in another sense. It's just so really better explained as separating the two, and that should evolve to integrating them again as well.